Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are going to do something absolutely fascinating. We're going to pop the hood on human consciousness and mechanically break down exactly how the mind manufactures its own suffering. If you've ever felt, just trapped in a spiral of overthinking, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to dismantle that illusion piece by piece.
I want you to imagine, just for a second, that someone walks right up to you and drops this phrase, "You're an idiot." Now, think about the physical reality of that event. It is incredibly brief. The sound arises, it's heard, and it completely disappears within seconds. On a purely mechanical level, it's really just a vibration in the air, a quick perception, and a momentary mental recognition. That's it. It's over. But here is the massive mystery we're solving today. Why does a 2-second sound completely ruin your entire day? How does a momentary, fleeting vibration in the air transform into hours, or even days, of manufactured mental anguish? What's the actual machinery behind that?
Well, let's dive right into this. Here is our structured path today. 1. The mind-suffering factory. 2. The illusion of continuity. 3. Dissolving the observer. 4. Breaking the feedback loop. 5. The neuroscience of no self. And 6. A practical daily test.
First up, Section 1, the mind's suffering factory, and how we manufacture our own pain. Let's look at exactly what happens in the brain the millisecond after that insult lands. Think about the stark difference here. If you physically touch a hot stove, it causes brief, sharp pain, right? That's a physical signal. But when someone insults you, the original sound is gone instantly. By mentally replaying it for hours, you're essentially artificially reheating that pain again and again, completely on your own, without any new stimulus at all. The mind doesn't just experience the raw event, it reacts to it. And, this brilliantly illustrates the 3-step secondary process where all our suffering actually lives. The mind just doesn't stop. First, it reconstructs. It replays the words repeatedly, maybe even distorting them a bit. Second, it elaborates. It builds this whole narrative like, they don't respect me, I always get treated like this. And third, it identifies. It links the event to your core self. I was attacked. It's like a sound echoing in an empty room, but in this case, your mind is both the room and the echo. You're literally doing it to yourself. This actually brings us to a really profound ancient concept called dukkha. Reality is in constant flux. Sensations, thoughts, and emotions arise and dissolve super rapidly. The problem isn't that things change, it's that the mind behaves as if they don't. We try to freeze pleasant experiences and completely reject unpleasant ones. But because everything is inherently unstable, this mismatch creates friction. Clinging to these mental events is exactly like gripping a piece of ice really tightly. Gripping it doesn't preserve the ice, it just accelerates your own discomfort. So if everything is constantly changing, why do we feel so solid? Moving right along, Section 2, the illusion of continuity, or how we stitch together the self. In direct reality, your experience is just discrete separate moments. One thought, then another, then another. But the mind falsely stitches these similar thoughts together. Because they share similar content, your brain constructs the illusion, hey, I've been thinking about this continuously. But in reality, each moment is brand new. The continuity is a total fabrication. And this applies not just to your thoughts, but to your entire sense of identity. Which brings us to Section 3, dissolving the observer. Seriously, who is actually watching? This leads us to a slightly deeper but absolutely fascinating concept. If our thoughts are just fleeting moments stitched together, who exactly is the I observing them? When you first try to pay attention to your mind, maybe in meditation or just quiet time, it feels very stable. You think, I am observing my thoughts. There's you, the stable subject, and your thoughts, the object. But when you look with deep attention, cracks begin to appear. The observer itself has qualities. Right now it feels calm, maybe later it feels tense or distracted. Since those qualities change moment to moment, the observer itself isn't even constant. You eventually realize there's no fixed center. It's really just layers of processes observing other processes. The intention to observe arises, the act happens, and then awareness of that act passes away. Say you notice you're angry. Then you notice the noticing of the anger. Then that meta-awareness itself just fades. It's an endless chain. Each layer is just another temporary event. There is no permanent you standing behind a curtain watching it all unfold. All right, section 4, breaking the feedback loop and the power of non-reaction. So if we're just a series of rapid-fire events, how in the world do we stop the suffering factory? Let's map out how this builds into a trap. This is the incredibly fast feedback loop of a normal mind. You get an insult, that's a sensation, you react with anger, you reinforce it with mental replay, and that generates identity formation, which creates even more intense sensation. Bam! You've just taken a 2-second sound and forged it into a rigid, painful identity. Now look at the alternative here. Observe, don't react is completely classic advice, but it is not about suppressing your feelings. It's purely mechanical. When you react, you feed the pattern. But when you don't react, you literally starve the feedback loop. You weaken the chain. Without you actively reheating the pain, the experience is forced to complete its natural life cycle and simply fade away. Intense experiences will dissolve completely on their own if you just stop sustaining them. Section 5, the neuroscience of no self and the collapse of identity. So this ancient framework is stunningly precise. But let's shift gears and look through a scientific lens. The crucial point here is that your sense of self is not a solid object in your brain. It actually relies on 3 ongoing activities. Memory, which is really just present moment thoughts linking to the past. Identification, which is quite literally just a mental labeling process saying, this is me. And control, which is often just an intention that arises entirely on its own. When you observe these closely, the self stops feeling central. It reveals itself as just a recurring construction, a pattern. I know, that can sound a little intimidating, right? If memory, identity, and control are just fleeting thoughts, and there is no fixed observer, what is actually left of you? Now, what is really, truly fascinating here is how perfectly these 2,500-year-old Vipassana insights map directly onto modern neuroscience. The illusion of continuity, that's what neuroscientists call predictive processing, your brain constantly guessing what happens next to create a smooth reality. And the collapse of the self? That maps perfectly to quieting the default mode network, which is the brain region responsible for self-referential thought. What remains isn't nothing. Experience continues. Awareness functions. You still think and act, but without that heavy added psychological friction of, this is happening to me, or this defines who I am. Life just becomes vastly more fluid. Finally, Section 6, a practical daily test for dismantling the illusion. All right, we've covered a lot of deep philosophy and science, so let's bring it all back down to earth and see how we can spot this in our own lives. Because intellectual understanding isn't enough. We have to see the mechanics for ourselves. The very next time something mildly irritating happens, say someone cuts you off in traffic or sends a blunt email, try this. 1. Notice the raw physical sensation, like a tight chest. 2. Watch how instantly your mind starts narrating a victim story. 3. Step back and observe that narration itself as just another passing event. If you stay with it, you will literally watch multiple layers of your mind arise and pass away. None of them stay, and none of them are truly you. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The next time you feel personally attacked or caught in a spiral of suffering over a tiny 2-second event, stop and ask yourself, what if the you being insulted doesn't really exist the way you think it does? What if it's all just an echo in an empty room? Once you realize you're the one building the room, you finally have the power to tear it down. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to test this in your own mind today.